I think there's a lot of tension in how to talk about a government when it's being vilified by so many media outlets, by so many governments. It becomes, I think, a lot harder to be critical for understandable reasons. And I think that what's interesting, though, is to point out that among the people who are critical, even among the people who may want to change the government, they don't want to be bombed, which again is just like common sense. So I think that that's something that undermines the regime, that this is like a popular supported movement, that if you care about Iranians, you should want to bomb them. I mean, I know I'm overstating it because it's so ridiculous, but we see this with Gaza also. People talk about, oh, Hamas is so terrible to LGBTQ people, and we're gonna like let's table whether or not that's true. Somehow they think the solution then is to kill LGBTQ people, to liberate them from their lives. I believe Max Blumenthal mentioned that the other day. He talked about liberating women in Iran from their lives. I mean, where does this kind of thinking come from?
Well, this is not new. You have this concept, for example, in Orientalism that
Right.
goes back centuries.
Of which you are
And,
a professor.
and
Reminder to everyone. Yeah.
yeah, well, yeah, whatever. But, for example, saving brown women from brown men and that sort of thing. But it's always about liberation, the civilizing mission, the white man's burden,
Right.
and that sort of thing existed in the past. Now it manifests itself in a different way, but that's how human beings are. If they want to abuse others, my understanding is that if they want to abuse others, they have to justify it to themselves first and foremost,
Right.
and in order to be able to live with themselves. So a person who's stealing another person's land has to convince himself, at least to a degree, that that person didn't deserve that land. Or if someone kills another person, they say, well, he deserved to die.
Right.
Uh, Maybe after killing a few people, they no longer need to convince themselves and they just become murderers. But in any case, I think that to a large degree, in order to legitimize what they do, they have to create these narratives. So, for example, ever since for over 20 months, the Israeli regime has been carrying out some maybe the worst atrocity in certain ways in human history. And that is being in the sense that it's being carried out in front of a live audience day and night for well over a year and a half. You've had bigger crimes in human history. You've had larger numbers of people slaughtered in horrific ways, but you've never seen it being carried out in front of you. People have never
Right.
seen these major crimes, whether in the liberation movements in Africa, Latin America, Asia, or in World War II or World War One. We don't have much footage of these things, and if there is, people saw that those bits and pieces many years, decades later. But what we're seeing in Gaza is basically are events that happen sometimes literally just a few seconds before or a few minutes before, sometimes a couple of hours before, and it's all online. And despite the fact that we're seeing it day and night, Western media continue to justify it or try to justify it. So, and Western governments. So, sorry, there because of the echo. Sometimes
I'm,
it's difficult to concentrate.
I'm sorry. Yeah. This is
But
like a reality
no,
TV
no, that's
show.
fine.
If you've
While
been
we're
able to
watching
concentrate
it,
while talking to Pierce Morgan, this is a lot easier than that, right? Yeah.
yeah.
Having
Well,
to
actually,
suppress
well,
your
that's a good
gag reflex.
example. Yeah, Piers Morgan is a good example. For 20 months, they were trying to justify this genocide, and then it was gradually that narrative was collapsing because people across the world were waking up to the reality. And so, if you want to attack Iran, what do you do? How do you justify a genocidal regime attacking Iran? You have to demonize Iran very uh, heavily. You have to, hit day and night, and that's what they've been doing for the last 10 days or so. Or it's always been there, but when you look at Piers Morgan, it's clear that people like him are paving the way for aggression. They're making Iran look so sinister, so monstrous, and so evil, and such a threat to the world, and how it's just a dystopia that if you bomb it, it's somehow okay.
Speaking of Pierce Morgan, trigger warning to you, doctor, and trigger warning to everyone in the audience. But we are going to show a clip that you'll at least be able to hear, Dr. Marandi, of of a recent interaction between you and Piers Morgan. And this is one of the many master classes that you provided in how to respond to, um, stenography media.
And you advocate the devil.
It sounds like a guy who is trying to dictate to women how they should dress, how they should behave. Do you understand that in the West, we look at that as reprehensible behavior?
No, in the West, you objectify women, you commodify women, and you sexualize women, and you have Epsteins and many Epsteins to control.
Well, we give women the freedom to dress how they wish. Why would you decline them that freedom?
In Iran, we have women pilots, we have women scientists. My boss at the University of Tehran, the dean of my faculty is a woman. For the 21 years that I've been an academic at the University of Tehran, 17 and a half of those years, the dean of my faculty was one woman or another. Don't misrepresent Iran. It doesn't work anymore, Piers. Your Western empire is on the decline. The whole of the global South is witnessing the crimes that are being carried out by your regimes. And your declining regimes are now despised by your own people. You're crushing people, students who are protesting genocide. You're not even crushing students who are protesting your own government for something that they're doing at home. You're crushing students for protesting genocide in another country. But you can't tolerate that. And your media is controlled by a group of rich people. They control the narrative, and you call that a democracy. Your choice is either Hillary Clinton or Biden or Trump. And then when that decision is made, the whole of Europe, Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand fall in line as good soldiers. You don't have democracy.
Wow. Yeah. So that is, again, it's a masterclass, I think, in how you respond to Western chauvinists. What do you have any tips for people when they go on shows like Piers Morgan's and they are presented with this pseudo feminist argument about how we want to liberate women from their hijabs by, I guess, dropping bombs on their heads?
I really am not a big fan of my own debating skills. I'm usually very dissatisfied with myself once I leave the studio or once the program is over. And there are lots of people I think who do a lot better than me and who speak much more eloquently. But usually, I think what helps is that you have facts. And the facts, when you have facts, it makes the argument much easier. They have to fabricate an argument based upon their imagination or based upon a narrative that has been created for centuries and reinforced in recent years, but founded upon that Orientalism of old. So when I invited Piers Morgan to come to Iran on his show, and I didn't surprise him. I told one of his producers before the show, what if I invite him, what would his response be? And I don't remember exactly what she said, but it was sort of like, go for it. And I invited him, and he rejected it. And then in this last session, of course, he said yes. So he was implying that I take him hostage, or I don't know, treat him like a hostage, or put him in prison. It's very insulting, but it doesn't bother me. But the point is that when he rejects visiting Tehran, then he has already lost the argument. Because whenever he says, well, you're evil in Iran and you're beating women day and night on the streets and you're gunning them down or you're doing this or that, I say, well, why don't you just come and look for yourself? And when you refuse, I mean, I'm not saying that if someone doesn't travel to a place, they can't comment about it. You
Which
can't.
is
I
the
mean,
excuse with Israel, right?
but when, sorry?
Often, which is often the defense of Israel. You don't live there, you don't know what it's like.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
But for someone who refuses
Right.
to travel to a country and says, no, 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 I don't want to see it, then he's already lost the argument. He tries to narrow down the argument to the way in which women dress in Iran, or the dress codes that are in the public sphere. And it's very interesting that in the early, like in the 19th century, if you look at many of the texts, one of the reasons used to state that Westerners, to claim that Westerners were more civilized than people outside of the West, was they said that women dressed more conservatively, and that these Latin America, many people and women in different parts of the world were they wore less clothes. So a sign of being civilized was the way in which it dressed. But when it changes and in the West they dress less, they're still more civilized. It's still a sign of being more civilized. Or for example, in the 19th century also, one of the claims made about Muslims, especially in like Ottomans in the Ottoman Empire, was that they were homosexual, and that was a sign of their backwardness. And of course, that wasn't a Western characteristic. But then, when in the West the mood changes or the narrative changes about homosexuality, then the non-Western world is still not civilized because they're not accepting of homosexuality in the way in which the West is. In other words, the values change. Sometimes they're reversed, or they change 180 degrees, or 360 degrees, as some European leaders saying nowadays. But they change 180 degrees, but the hierarchy remains in place. In other words, if I say, Katie, you're my inferior, today I say you're my inferior because I'm A and you're B, but tomorrow if I'm B, you're still inferior because I'm B and you're A.
Right. Yeah. It's like I'm inferior because I don't know, my hair is too long today, and then tomorrow I'll be
Right.
inferior because my hair's too short.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.